Yeah. So you know me. You know I love these TwoMorrows press, right? The Roy Thomas. In some ways, these magazines, back issue, alter ego, covers like usually the older stuff. Even Comic Creator, they cover a lot of things, man, that I remember. I have a really good memory of comics from the 80s to now. And this one covered, right, Matt Wagner, so Mage and Grendel. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'm not Mage. I haven't really gotten into as much as Grendel, but Mage has a lot going for it, okay? But I'm going into this issue basically interviewing Matt Wagner and everything from where he got the idea, right? The Grendel novel came out in '71, telling the Beowulf story from the Grendel point of view, right? Kind of like the Saberhagen's Dracula tapes, you know. Um, right. Matt describes, right? And I think Matt, I mean, it's none of my business. I think he's from, they say he's from Lewiston. It's kind of like by Mifflin County. There he is, right? Right. And this is the whole thing. I had gone over the Grendel black and white stuff, the original Grendel series that came out in Comic, all right? If you look at those first several appearances of Grendels, you'd think I was an enormous anime fan. In fact, I only just discovered the world of Japanese animation. And part of its appeal was that it was foreign and a bit mysterious to me at this point. Nowhere near as ubiquitous as it is today. As a result, I tend to play with those forms, but it was only a phase. So that's one of those things where, and his art bears that out. Okay, his early stuff was kind of like manga influenced, but to him it was very new. And he brings up the older artists that he liked: Alec Toth, Hugo Pratt, Richard Corbett, Mobius. Right, I can see it now in a lot of ways that Matt definitely was influenced by the other foreign comics that never really caught on in America, except with a few people, right? The European style comics, right? Marvel had an imprint for that epic, but it didn't really catch on as much as the manga did. So, and there's reasons why, but just reading it, you see the original comical primer, right? I have an issue of the original Grendel series, right? And you see Matt developing as an artist, and it's just interesting. There's the Diana Shoots, the editor. Look, there he is, in the '80s, man. I remember back in the day. Now I can remember the cool people in the '80s, right? People who were cool, like I would say, I wouldn't want to say hipsters, but you sort of had them, and just it goes over everything, right? When the Grendel series is made, when you had the female Grendel, Christine Spar, the flying cars that we never had. Thank God. Like I keep saying, you would never be safe anywhere if the cars could fly. Right? Right. And it was a great interview. Right, there's the vampire Tajiro. There's a great interview going through the years, showing him as a man, a normal man. Right, he was a normal dude getting married at a young age. Right? It was really cool reading this, and they kept the theme of this interview was that Matt kept saying, "I want to change things up every time. I want to challenge myself. I want to have at some point the art I did in the original series that ended midstream. I want to make Art Deco instead of manga. I want to make it a backup to another work I'm doing. I want to make it all text. Okay." I want to have other artists draw instead of me, where I write, and then I don't write a full script, right? I let them know what I kind of want, and then how are you going to interpret that? And then he gets back to the art. Now remember these issues, okay, where I'm going to draw like very strange style, like like 100 panels, little panels each page. I remember that. Okay, I'm gonna have collage covers, whether you started having like like the Dave McKean type art. Right? I'm gonna show society breaking down. Okay, I'm gonna, like everyone else, I'm gonna think the Soviet Union will exist longer than it did. And it's just, and then of course I'm gonna bring back another Grendel after issues of Grendel being like a nondescript metaphor. I'm gonna bring it back at Grendel with the mask and the blade, Epi Thatcher, right? God and the devil. Yeah, and you see, it was a great looking at this, seeing how this guy he kept challenging himself, challenging everything. Tim Sale, great artist, man. And I like how all these guys were rewarded by getting high profile and famous works at DC. Right? They made it. These guys made it. Man, I showed you the Tim Sale doing art for Robotech 2, right? And became a great artist. And he passed away in the last couple of years. Rest in peace. What he mentions the okay, how of course manga wasn't an influence as much, but there was one manga that was, you bet your ass, one of the best manga series ever, Lone Wolf and Cub. Big influence on, of course, Grendel Warchild. This was a Grendel Prime comes out. He has the Batman Grendel, okay? And it's interesting. I didn't realize where he was gonna make a new Grendel for this, and his editor Diana, right, who's basically he married her sister, basically said, "Why don't you have Hunter Rose, who was supposed to be the evil Bruce Wayne anyway? Why don't you put him in? Why don't you put him in instead of making a totally new one?" Okay? And he did that, and this was a huge thing. I remember when this came out, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, I don't want to withhold it. He did the grand. I forgot this one. I don't know what happened with this one, but this is interesting. Of course, the famous story, right? Where and this is great. Just to sum this up, when of all the stories he did, when he started doing all these black, white, and red ones, that now they bring back that format for other series, where Hunter Rose, the original Grendel, is shown that, right, he's going to show that he was not the first one, but he definitely spawned a lot of the later ones, and like the typical Matt thing to do, where you would never get that catharsis you wanted. You would never get that revenge you wanted. Where Christine Spar never got Tajiro, okay? Where Tajiro was later killed by Epi Thatcher, but like years later, centuries later, he did this thing where when Hunter Rose realizes what his legacy spawns, he chooses to ignore this omen. Instead, expunge all record of this episode from his journals. His megalomania can't bear the thought that he isn't utterly unique. In his mind, there is no other Grendel, and his actions and identity are completely self-generated. The future be damned. What a bastard. I love that Matt always did that he always did the opposite, even though when I was younger, I didn't like it. So, and of course, this was the one I was talking about. This is the later Grendel series that came out during the COVID bullshit. And of course, this didn't work out too well. But obviously, and look, it's cool. There's his son, right? His son became a very talented colorist. That's great, man. That's awesome. So, right, my son grew up in my home studio. Good for you, man. So, anyway, I just wanted to go over that. It was very, very, and I had this magazine for a couple of years. I never read it until I read this whole thing again, and it was very satisfying. Matt, you are awesome. You are great. I can't wait for the sequel to this. And I'm a real cynical, nihilistic jerk off who doesn't like almost any comics anymore, but I'm looking forward to yours. So, hey, man, and you're one of the old heads, so that shows you.